3 weeks ago, I made a decision that's going to make my brain hurt for the next few years. I started learning Japanese. I thought it's a great New Year's resolution, learning Japanese in 2025, but then got a little too excited, so I already started. So not next year, but 3 weeks ago. And no, this is not another I learned Japanese in 30 days video. Stop it. This is about taking on one of the most challenging languages for English or German speakers, and doing it in a way that actually works. Hopefully. In this video, I break down why I chose Japanese, what makes it such a monster of a language, and of course, most importantly, how to learn it. We are looking at the exact strategy in detail that I'm going to use to tackle it. Whether you're interested in learning Japanese yourself or just curious about how to tackle a challenging language, you should stick around for this one. The strategies and different stages apply to basically any language. First things first. The initial plan that I already told you about was to wholeheartedly and fully focus on 1 more year of Spanish. Just Spanish. But then I realized that this is not really necessary. I've already reached a point where I don't need to actively dedicate more time to the language. Between traveling through South America and having a Peruvian girlfriend, Spanish has just become a natural part of my life. My Spanish is not perfect, far from it even, but it's good enough to understand basically any kind of conversation and also converse myself in daily situations where I need to or where I want to. And I think just because of my life circumstances, I will naturally and automatically improve in the language. So I think it's time for another new challenge. I know that learning Japanese will be a completely different beast compared to Spanish. While Spanish shares the same alphabet as English and German and has thousands of similar words and grammar structures, well, Japanese doesn't have any of that. Japanese throws all of that out of the window, and I would even argue that it would probably be easier to learn Japanese if I wouldn't know English, German, and Spanish. Like if I would start from zero, because Japanese is just so different. Different writing systems? Check. 3 of them, actually. Completely different grammar structure? You bet. Words that have absolutely nothing in common with English? Oh yes. But you know what? That's kind of why I choose it in the first place. I could have picked up Italian or Portuguese, both beautiful languages that I maybe want to eventually learn. And I even think these would be relatively easy to pick up because of my Spanish knowledge or Spanish background that I have right now. But I want to wait until my Spanish is rock solid, because I don't want to mix up these similar languages, and I also just want something more challenging. Something that's going to make me think differently about languages and language learning itself. So why Japanese specifically? Why not Mandarin or Arabic or Hungarian? Just talking about very difficult languages here. There are 2 main reasons next to the ones I already mentioned. First, I've been to Japan 3 times already. And each of these visits left me with wanting to connect more and further with the culture and with the language and the people and everything that Japan has to offer. The English level is not awful, but also not great in Japan. And now that I speak Spanish, I realized how much more amazing it is if you can speak the language of the people of the country you're visiting. And yeah, this has just been amazing for me in Latin America and has been quite the revelation because I've been traveling for years now. But with my Spanish knowledge that I now have, I can just experience the country on a completely different level. And I want the same for Japan. And then there's also the anime. The anime aspect. Yeah, I know, kind of cliche, but who cares? Lots of people get into Japanese because of anime. Anime? Why does the word sound so weird to me? I'm not like a veteran in this space. I've only watched maybe 10-ish shows total, but I do like it. And Attack on Titan is probably my favorite piece of fiction ever. No matter if it's like series, books, movies, whatever. Like Attack on Titan is insane. The thought of being able to rewatch it for like the 10th time, but actually understanding the original Japanese dialogue is really motivating. And yeah, like I said, I know this is a cliche reason to learn Japanese, but who cares? Like what you gonna do? Now, before we get too excited about just watching anime without subtitles all day, I need to talk about what I'm getting myself into. Specifically, why learning Japanese is so challenging, and maybe even more importantly, how I'm planning to do it. So what makes Japanese so difficult? And can we maybe make it easier? Japanese has not one, not two, but three writing systems. Yes, three. Hiragana and katakana are kind of like alphabets, but not really. They are the same 46 sounds that we call a syllabary. The main difference between hiragana and katakana is that one is used for actual Japanese words, like arigato, and the other is used for borrowed words, like gemu. These two are easy to learn though, but then there is kanji. And that's where things get interesting. Kanji are Chinese characters that Japanese adopted. We're talking about thousands of characters, where each one can have multiple readings and meanings depending on the context. For example, this kanji, or rather radical, can mean life, birth, or raw. And as if that's not enough, it can also be read as sei, sho, or nama. It purely depends on context. And unlike hiragana and katakana, which are fairly straightforward, many kanji characters are complex with multiple components and strokes. Like, what the hell is that? Or this one? It means depression. That makes sense. Luckily we, or more specifically I, don't need to learn how to write these characters. I don't care. Unless you're planning to write love letters in perfect Japanese calligraphy, learning to recognize them is enough. Nowadays, basically all writing is done on digital devices that autofill in the kanji for you. On top of that, my research led me to not learn kanji in isolation. I will only learn them as part of real words, of vocabulary. Watch this to understand why.
How to read this? Reading of the first kanji is kokoro and shin. And the second kanji is chi or ji. So reading must be kokoro chi or kokoro ji or shin chi, shinji. Right? Actually, all of them are wrong.
Why?
Well, no, there's no why. That's the way it is. There's a word, kokochi, and someone decided to put these two characters here. And we read it kokochi, not kokorochi or nothing else. Yeah, so even if you learn all the kanji out there, it's useless. You still wouldn't be able to read a word. So if you're now trying to study, memorize kanji to learn Japanese, maybe you should quit doing it. Instead, maybe you should use your time to learn vocabulary.
Then there's grammar, which is pretty much the opposite of whatever you know about grammar so far. I just learned this phrase, for example. Literally, it translates to something like here of house of person exist. In English, it's the exact other way around. What it really means is the owner of the house there? So far I didn't figure out much about Japanese grammar. I only know that the verb usually comes at the end, that it's subject, object, verb instead of subject, verb, object, which is something we sometimes have in German as well, but in Japanese it seems to be the case that it's always like that. So instead of I eat sushi, it turns into I sushi eat, or rather, watashi wa sushi no taberu. There are also all these particles, which are like little markers that show the function of words in a sentence. So for example, watashi wa sushi no tabemasu literally means I, topic marker, sushi, object marker, eat. It will take a while to get used to that, I assume. At least the pronunciation seems to be pretty straightforward. Unlike English, where through, though, and tough somehow all sound completely different. I think the key is to approach these challenges strategically. That's why I already spent significant time accumulating resources and watching videos about people who explain their experiences learning Japanese. And instead of trying to learn everything at once, I try to break it down into little pieces. Which brings me to the next point of the video, which is my strategy on how to approach this whole endeavor. If you've been following my channel, you probably know that I developed a language learning app called Lengia. So obviously that's going to be my main tool, right? Well, not exactly. First of all, Japanese isn't even supported in Lengia yet. That will change in the next couple of months or so, but even then, it's not the best choice for complete beginners like me. Here's some recent feedback I got from a user. I think Lengia is the best way to improve your skill in a language in which you have a basic understanding. For a total beginner, the beginner level might still be a bit overwhelming, but with a basic level, you can make great use of this tool. And you know what? I completely agree. I'm still working on making Lengia more suitable for complete beginners, maybe through short comprehensible input videos or pre-made stories that teach you the first 500 words. So once I reach a basic level in Japanese, I will definitely also use Lengia. But for now I need something different. So what's the plan? If you've seen my video about comprehensible input, you know that I learned Spanish primarily through immersion, watching, listening and reading content that I was actually interested in. I use a similar approach for Japanese, but with some important tweaks and new strategies that I want to try out. The first major difference is that I need to tackle the writing system before I can make use of any written content. And I've already made progress here. I've learned all 46 hiragana and it was surprisingly fast. It took me like 3 days with maybe 30 to 60 minutes per day. I'm not at 100% success rate when I review my hiragana, but I'm good enough to actually read some hiragana and have them in my flashcards and so on, so that I get natural exposure to these characters. So I expected it to take like 2 weeks or something like that, but it was really only 3 or 4 days maybe. I plan to do the same with katakana before the end of the year. And then I just stop to specifically practice them and will instead just see them constantly in real words and sentences through my flashcards. Speaking of flashcards, to make any input comprehensible, I need to have some kind of base. I need to have a foundation of, let's say, 500 to 750 words. And I will do that with the popular Genki deck, which is called the Core 2.3K deck. It contains the 2300 most frequently used Japanese words. And I can tell you, I already noticed that it's significantly harder to learn Japanese words than it is to learn Spanish words. When I see a word, I need to understand both its meaning and how it sounds, or rather what the kanji looks like in hiragana. The first few days were rough, but after 2 weeks I'm starting to enjoy it. I do 10 new words every morning using Genki, which automatically schedules all the reviews. I'm also using another flashcard deck with 50 new words per day, but this one is a little different. Because this one is connected to something called grammar priming, which is a new strategy I want to test out. So what is grammar priming? Well, it's basically exposing yourself to grammar concepts before you actually need to use them actively. The important part here is that you only expose yourself to them. You're not studying them. Neither are you really reviewing them or doing fill-in-the-blanks tests or whatever. Think of it like getting a preview of what's coming. You're not trying to master the grammar right away, but when you encounter it later in real content, your brain goes, oh yeah, I remember, I saw this before. For Japanese, there are 2 resources that pretty much anyone recommends. Tae Kim's Guide to Learning Japanese and the Genki Textbooks. So if I would use them, I would just read half of them in a week or so to get some exposure, and then the second half at a way later stage. However, we were talking about a flashcard deck, and that's where things get interesting, because I found something even better. At least, I think it's even better for me. I found an Genki deck which is based on Tae Kim's guide that teaches grammar concepts using real anime scenes. Each card introduces either a new word or grammatical concept, and seeing it used in real context with audio makes it stick much better. I've used this deck for the last couple of weeks now and I'm really happy with it. One of the best things about it is that it lets me focus on listening first, which is exactly what I want. You hear the Japanese, see the scene, and understand the grammar point all at once. I'm not theorizing over grammar concepts, but just get the exposure I want while learning vocabulary, which should always be the main focus. I did something similar when it comes to grammar priming with Spanish, albeit at a way later stage. I basically speedran all the courses for B1, B2 and C1 that exist on Babbel, just to get some exposure, and I did that in a month, kind of. This time I want to do this grammar priming much earlier, which is also the way that most people would suggest you do it, and I do this specifically for Japanese because, yeah, well, Japanese grammar is just so different. But the principle remains the same. I'm not trying to memorize rules, just getting familiar with patterns that I'll encounter later in my immersion practice. So what's next after getting these basics down? My main focus will be on listening. I want to train my ear to recognize Japanese sounds and common patterns before diving too deep into reading. This means starting with really easy comprehensible input, simple podcasts designed for beginners, YouTube videos with clear speech, and maybe some children's shows. The goal is to get used to how Japanese actually sounds in real contexts. And at this point I will also have added Japanese to Lengia, so I can make use of the story generation, listen to the audio, and use flashcards and translations when necessary. When it comes to reading, my plan is to start with easy visual novels and easy manga that have furigana. That's the tiny hiragana written above kanji characters to show how they are pronounced. Kind of like training wheels when you're learning how to ride a bike. I will also implement a similar functionality in Lingia so that I can start reading there as well. Manga and visual novels make sense because, well, they have the visual element. This context helps you understand what's going on, even when you don't catch every word, making input more comprehensible. And I'm not sure yet if I will keep doing flashcards practice to learn more vocabulary at this stage, or just do so using immersion as I did in Spanish. I will figure that out along the way, I guess. Now there's one more tool I'm very excited to use when it comes to immersing in Japanese, not at the very beginning, but at a little bit of a later stage, and that is the Advanced Voice Mode of ChatGPT. This is something I've talked about on this channel before. It's ridiculously good and perfect for language learners. You can easily tell it to speak very slowly, use simple vocabulary and adjust the speaking style to match your level. Imagine having a conversation partner who's available 24/7, never gets tired of repeating things, and can perfectly adjust to your current Japanese level. If you want to learn more about this method, you should check out this video next. For now though, domo arigato for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.